On May the 6th, 1954, Roger Bannister, at age of 25, broke the 4-minute mile barrier in 3 minutes 59.4 seconds. In this video by SSA Athletics, I'm Adam McCarthy, and today we'll detail how he did it and how you can potentially improve your running in line with what Roger Bannister was doing, as well as the science behind it.
4-minute mile is memorable as a race to become the first human being to run under 4 minutes 4 laps of an athletics track. That being John Landy from Australia, Roger Bannister and Sandy Roberts had all run 4:02 at this point in time.
As the gun fired, Chris Braysher went into the lead and I slipped in effortlessly behind him, feeling tremendously full of running. My legs seemed to meet no resistance at all, almost as if impelled by an unknown force.
I so love this old footage and the posh way they used to say things. And that unknown force you're talking about, well, that is called drag. And what you're effectively doing is going within a pack. You are slipstreaming in behind another fellow athlete. When you're doing running and you enter the pack, the middle runner is actually using less energy than the person in front. The person in front is, in theory, dragging them round in clean air. Therefore, they use less energy. Plus, you can also use the front runner as a hare to try. If they go faster, you go faster. If they go slow, you keep in behind them. And this helps to motivate that athlete to potentially run faster, push harder than what they would normally do, and therefore technically run faster. Now, drafting in athletics and in running in particular, there isn't that much of an advantage taken, but it's just enough advantage for you to potentially not utilize as much energy as a guy who's leading from the front. When we compare this to other sports like swimming or even cycling, where that advantage is greater.
Also, the faster you are moving, the greater the effect of drag has upon you. So, for instance, in cycling, they cycle faster around a track than what an athlete would run round, and as a result, feel the effects of drag more.
We seemed to be going so slowly. Impatiently, I shouted faster, but Braysher kept his head and didn't change the pace.
I'm pretty impressed that Roger Bannister could shout while running a competitive race. The Grand Prix level of athletics in modern day athletics, we often employ the use of hares, or otherwise known as pacemakers. These are professional athletes whose job is to lead from the front and effectively shield the pack from the elements, as well as helping them run faster. If you get faster times, people are more likely to watch, and therefore you're more likely to have a more exciting race. In the day of Roger Bannister, they didn't have, or the idea of concept of a professional, the idea or concept of having a pacemaker was a very new idea and wasn't very well seen on the circuit. The athletics in itself was not professional, it was truly 100% amateur, so therefore you wouldn't have any pacemakers paid. And the pacemaking you've seen here was actually more to do with the techniques and what they've been trained on with the coach and what the race plan the coach came up for all three athletes. Notice I said elements. What the front runner does is, in theory, help block the athletes behind from all the elements. And therefore it prevents that force from front, the friction being the wind, and that can help slow you down. Now, if you're shielded from the wind by the front runners, you therefore utilize less energy again. That's why on the Grand Prix circuit you may see 2 or 3 runners in the more longer distance events surrounding the athlete. So you have one in front and then 2 or 3, either one in behind or one around the side, acting as a shield. Now, in the professional Grand Prix series, when the front runners go off, you have 1 or 2 pushing them around, and then maybe 1 or 2 behind in the pack itself, helping to bring them along and helping to shield them from the wind. By them going on the outside, that helps with that shielding of the athletes in the pack. This is even more noticeable, the effects of the friction placed upon the athlete, more noticeable in even more stronger windier conditions. Generally, if it's more windier, the slower you run, because you're going around the 400 meter track, and at one point you're going to get slowed down, while at the next point you've got the wind behind you acting like a missile behind your backside. But likewise, the effect of having a front runner shielding the athletes behind is even greater and even more noticeable in even more windier conditions. And when you are new to middle distance, especially the 800s and the 1500s, it can be so tempting to try and run it out into the front, because when you're out in front you can see everyone around you and you're trying to compete, you're trying to race with people, but that's not necessarily smart. What you want to do, and what many of these athletes do, is they learn to run in a pack. They do pack running as part of their training, and they get used to running a pack and realize how they can run in a pack to best suit their performance. Now, likewise, if you're in the pack, there's going to be a lot of bustling, a lot of juggling, and when it comes to the point where you need to sprint out, sometimes that pack isn't strung out enough, so you end up being caught within it, not being able to push on in order to win the race. You get kind of like caged in.
There are two main types of drag which affects an athlete. First of this is friction, or friction with the surface. As you hit every stride length, you in fact create friction with the surface, and that can potentially slow you down depending on how you land, as well as form friction, that being the shape of the athlete or the shape of the pack and how their running form affects them and the amount of drag that is created because of it. There is also a certain amount of air resistance depending on the conditions. This can vary between 2 to 6% depending on how windy it is.
I went on worrying about the pace until I heard the first lap time of 57.5 seconds. In the excitement, my knowledge of pace had deserted me. Brescia could have run the first quarter in 55 seconds without my realizing it, because I felt so full of running. But I should have had to pay for it later. At 1.5 laps, I was still worrying about the pace. A voice shouting, "Relax," penetrated to me above the noise of the crowd. I learned afterwards it was Stamford's. Unconsciously, I obeyed. If the speed was wrong, it was too late to do anything about it. So why worry?
Pace judgment is highly important in the middle distance events. Run too quickly and you will die. Run too slow and, well, you won't tire necessarily, but you won't necessarily be at the pace you're looking for, and you effectively have left it too late. Now, there are many ways we can do or practice pace judgment in training. One way of doing it is through tempo runs. You have a set pace and you get used to running that set pace. And that should help you know what it feels like to run at the correct pace or run at PB pace at a middle distance event. Now, tempo runs for sprinting and tempo runs for middle distance are very much different things. If you want to see the video to do with tempo runs with sprinting, click on the card on the right hand side above. Tempo running for sprinting is so different. That's just what we do with tempo running for sprinting is effectively getting people to run at 75% or 80% so they can actually complete the session, because you can't always sprint at 100%. You tire too early and you might not necessarily get the full benefit of the session. Tempo running in middle distance is literally about running at a certain pace so you know how it feels to run. Now, Roger Bannister and the rest of his training group, trained very much differently to how other athletes were training at the same time. The theory used to be that you had to get miles in, especially in the winter. Now, Roger Bannister and the group didn't necessarily get much miles in, especially in winter training, which is more aimed towards getting you fit, getting you generally fit, and before you get into your specific preparation and your speed training later on into the spring and the summer. He barely did around about 30 miles a week in the winter phase at the time, which isn't that much. Now, at the time, what we would call today tempo runs is what he was doing. He was also doing a lot of interval training, working at the shorter end of the distance. Now, at any distance, you get pacers and you get racers. The pacers can generally keep a good pace all the way around the track and therefore respond better to longer training. The racers prefer a shorter but more intense style of training, more speed-based training. And although we have moved more into teaching intervals and utilizing intervals within our session plans as we got over the years, our session plans have got better, have got more scientific and more practical in knowledge and know-how in order to make athletes faster. It doesn't matter that if you're a pacer or a racer, being a pacer will make you slower. It's all about finding the right training, what's best for that athlete. And you can get two different types of athletes, one a pacer, one a racer. And they may run still at the same times, but they'll be doing completely different training.
Roger Bannister also had to juggle with shifts at his local hospital. Therefore, his training was often 30 minutes long and often intense.
Yes, but very hard. I mean, after all, the race is only 4 minutes. So what good running 10 miles is it?
I barely noticed the half mile passed in 1 minute 58 seconds. I was relaxing so much that my mind seemed almost detached from my body. It was incredible that we could run at this speed without strain. I was barely aware of the fact that Chris Chataway was now going into the lead.
When you are at your fittest, the competing side of it feels easier. Now what you can see here is Roger Bannister and the guy in the third place moving round into the lead, utilising that slipstream effect from the front runner, giving them all that nice clean air and also helping them, shielding them from the wind, from the conditions. The guy in the front is spent. He can't compete with these other boys who have utilised less energy. What Roger Bannister has done here is followed the attack from the runner in third and followed through, still keeping in that clean air and still behind him. The mile, as well as its modern day predecessor, the 1500 metres, is a wind up of pace. You keep a rhythm, but each lap should get faster and faster and faster. That is what we have witnessed within this video.
And what we notice about Roger Bannister's running style compared to the others, it's slightly different. He has generally a more efficient running style that's more energy saving, that's less taxing, and because it's more energy efficient, he's able to store more energy, so when it comes to the sprint itself at the end, he's able to utilise that sprint to his advantage. Learning the style of the running itself is something that you can learn on track, but also off track, working with your arms, trying to keep them nice and relaxed and loose down below. He also has a long boundy stride. Okay, he is tall, so that probably helps. By having that long stride that's loose on the ground and not spending much time on the ground helps you as a runner. If you're doing longer strides, you eat the ground up quicker and you're doing less strides, so it's less energy.
Three-quarters of a mile, the effort was still barely perceptible. The time was 3 minutes 0.7 seconds, and by now the crowd was roaring. A 4-minute mile was possible. Somehow, to do it, I had to run the last lap in 59 seconds. Chataway led round the next bend, and then I pounced past him at the beginning of the back straight, 300 yards from the finish. I had a moment of mixed joy and anguish when my mind took over. It raced well ahead of my body and drew me compellingly forward.
From the bell indicating the last lap, what Chataway should have done is cover that move from 300 metres in and try and keep with him. Yet again, he might be going as fast as he can. He might be just sprinting at his 400 metre pace. Whereas Roger Bannister, who's been behind both athletes, has got a lot more energy left and is able to pass and move round him. What Roger Bannister has done here is just said, "Thank you very much, lad, and now I'm going to go out and win it."
I felt that the moment of a lifetime had come. Those last few seconds seemed never-ending. The faint line of the finishing tape stood ahead as a haven of peace after the struggle. I leapt at the tape, like a man taking his last spring to save himself from the chasm that threatens to engulf him. My effort was over, and I collapsed almost unconscious with an arm on either side of me. It was only then that the real pain overtook me. I knew I had done it before I even heard the time. I felt as if I was too close to have failed.
The mile has a special place in athletics history, being the only event that's not in metric. Okay, it's 1600 metres, but the metric mile in modern day sport of athletics is 1500 metres, 3 3/4 laps of the track. However, the mile itself is a benchmark for athletes today to gauge where they are. Generally in marathons, for instance, you're looking just to get over 4-minute miles if you can. Nowadays, loads of people have got under the 4-minute miles. It happens every year. Thousands of people, even some school kids do it. Such is the progression of athletics and the progression of the human body and our understanding of training. if you like to use a nerdy term, such as the power creep of athletics.
Landy is 300, Hallberg is 548, Milligan is 632, Bannister is 329. That is definitely not an indication that those four men are the men to watch, because the other four are fine competitors.
Now later on, Lindy and Bannister would meet in the Commonwealth Games in Vancouver. The American obviously couldn't participate because America is not part of the Commonwealth Games or even the Commonwealth itself. And this became known as the Miracle. Oh look, New Zealand, Bailey's doing a sprint star. That's so bizarre, doing a sprint star for the middle distance race. Anyway, these guys met up. They both broke the 4-minute mile barrier in the same race. The first time this had been done by two athletes in the same race.
Bannister of England over John Michael Landy of Australia, 1-2, and Rich Ferguson of Canada was third. What else do you say?
Miracle Mile brought the end of the 4-minute mile barrier race. I'm Adam McCarthy of SSA Athletics. Please subscribe, check out our Facebook pages. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!